of the things about, in the beginning of practice that people worry about, are concerned about is, sort of the distinction between religion and spirituality, and the distinction between various religions and their approaches. So, it strikes me to point out to people that religion basically suggests, not every religion, but the religions that we're mostly exposed to, and some elements in every religion suggest that there is some creator outside of us and outside of our universe that influences everything and stands in judgment of how we behave. Spirituality has a very different perspective than that, perhaps even the opposite perspective of that, which is that there is no creator outside the universe, that everything within the universe is alive and aware and an expression of the fundamental life of the universe. There is no separation between things, really. There is only one thing, and that is living awareness. And a spiritual, whereas a religious life is a life that is intended to be lived within the guidelines or the boundaries of the behavioral programs that the Creator has established for us. Spirituality is a life spent in recognition of the divinity of the body and the divinity of the mind, the divinity of, all objects that are united in the field of experience.
You're preaching to the choir when you're talking to me about this, I'm
mostly talking to the people who will watch this, because I think, for instance, we have on occasion talked about current events, and so last week's assassination of a bunch of newspaper people who were making cartoons about Islam raises the subject of religion, and it sort of raises the topic of how religious people behave, and whether or not a creator God might need humans to kill other humans in defense of his reputation or her reputation. It seems absurd. And I wanted to get people to understand that every religion and philosophy is really simply a model. It is a mental construct. World religions have become religions because only because they are in the service of some state. World religions serve a political and economic function. They have no, spiritual function whatsoever. And as, models, and even my own model, the framework in which I operate in, is still just a model. And that model is a model that I think is particularly useful because it has endured for a really long time, and because it speaks to the importance of the life within each of us, and the power that is within the life that is within each of us. I think that's really important. So, what I want to say further is, like this week, the Pope talked about, respecting religion, a person's religion. I think that's right. I think that's totally right. But I think also that we have to understand, really, at the end of the day, while there may be many models, there's only one pathway. There are not two pathways. And the reason that there's only one pathway is because that one pathway is for human beings, and we are all, unique but essentially the same. Within each of us there is an energetic structure that underlies our physical existence and also the physiological processes that support this physical existence. And if we look into our bodies and into the respiratory processes that sustain our bodies, we will see a completely different world than we imagine from both our education and our culture and the life experience, the sort of expectations and data points that our education and culture imprints on us. So there's only one pathway, and that pathway is the pathway that, following the breath, leads to the energy, which leads to the experience of the breath of life, the living awareness that is at the core of all experience. So, having said that, there's only one path. There are lots of models, but if that one path is not being articulated in the model, then at some point you are going to need a new model. Because the doorway to the experience of what is enduringly true about us as human beings and what is enduringly true about life, the doorway to that experience of enduring truth is within us. And it is following the path of the energy that will lead us to the awareness and recognition of that fundamental truth. And so we practice.
Can we practice within the context of our existing lifestyles, religious beliefs? I mean, you in a sense just separated religion and spirituality. Do they need to be separate? At one point were they not separate, and then that became the problem that they separated?
I think that when you start to have a system of beliefs, when you start to try to describe to people how they ought to be and what, the end point of a particular process has to look like, you have lost your way. And I think religion loses its way in saying, this is how it has to be and this is what it looks like at the end. Because every human being is unique, and every human being has the opportunity to articulate, their experience in unique ways. So there is one core, but there's no set of rules that's going to get you there. There is a path to follow, but that path is, and it's unique to each person. The behavioral aspects of it are unique to each person. But engaging the breath, following the breath, experiencing the movement of the breath in the body, experiencing the subtle processes that the breath is an expression of, and going continuously more deeply into yourself, you will come to understand that there are no rules, there are no answers, there are no particular way in which it has to be, and there is a structure to the universal experience that can be explained in a lot of different ways. And furthermore, I will say this, in every religious tradition there are people who talk like this. For instance, out of the Vedas arose the Tantric tradition, which is far more mystical and far more flexible in the way it, sees the question of purity and impurity. In Catholicism, remember there was John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila. Saint Teresa talked about, the 7-story tower, 7 chakras. John of the Cross talked about the dark night of the soul, the awakening of the breath of life within an individual person and the sort of, expulsion of all of the layers of suppressed pathology that an individual person represents. I mean, you have people who, in Buddhism, in Islam, you have the Sufi tradition which arose, which talks about the total importance of opening your heart to everything and immersing yourself in the bliss of that experience.
So it's there, the spirituality is, I guess, maybe a good way to end this talk. We can do a lot more talks about spiritual practice, but talking to people who do or do not have a practice or think they have a spiritual practice, but it's more of a religious practice, but what's the concise sort of guideline we can give people who either don't have a practice or who have a religion that they're very committed to?
Whatever it is that you are doing, do it fully and do it well. Whatever it is. Whatever it is, do it fully and do it well. Do it with love, with genuine love. Whatever it is. Do it with genuine love. If you don't have a practice, genuinely love your job, genuinely love your customers, genuinely love your if you're a teacher, love your students genuinely. If you're a physician, love your patients, love your family, love your life.
And that's a spiritual practice.
Genuinely love your life. And in order for that genuineness to be present, you will have to make contact with your own heart over and over and over and over again to revitalize the authenticity of your effort, and in so doing that will evolve into a spiritual practice. And then of course your model may have to change. That's perfectly wonderful. My model has changed, while I have continued to operate in the same system for the last 45 years, in the same basic context, my understanding of the model that I'm operating in has changed over and over and over again, and by now, and really for the last 20 years, has totally transcended all of the literature that is available that has ever been written about that model. So I think, whatever it is that is your belief system, as you grow closer to the real truth, however it is you decide you want to express it or conceptualize that truth, as you grow closer to it, the model that you have will become less viable. And, it's like for me, I grew up a Catholic, and I am grateful, that the very first lesson that we learned as Catholic kids in a Catholic school was God made us to know, love, and serve Him or her in this world.
They said her?
No.
You just added that.
Of course not. I added that.
I know they didn't say that in Sunday school.
So true. Only I went to school. I went to Sunday school every day of the week. But, so I really took it seriously and really tried to love God. And in trying to love God, I found my heart. And in trying to love God, I found the power of the breath to take me closer and closer and closer to my heart, to open my heart ever more deeply. I should say really take me closer and closer through the doorway of my heart to the experience of love. And I loved God. And, in a real way, I haven't been doing anything else since then.
And that's my experience too. So in my ideal belief, religion is supposed to be that container for us to develop a spiritual practice.
Right? It's supposed to be a series of suggestions. Where religion becomes cruel is when it suggests to people that, because they had a piece of bacon on Friday and they forgot to confess it, they may go to hell forever. Or because they missed going to church one Sunday. Or, or even more cruel, all the little babies ever born in India in the history of the world, because they weren't baptized, are all going to hell. I mean, these kind of insanities are, it's cruelty, and it's violent.
Or the other extreme, which I learned when I went to a Baptist church, is no matter what you've done, all you have to do is stand up and say,
I love God.
And
it's all forgiven. And you may be lying, but...
Or just strap those bombs to your body and go walk through that building and you get to go to heaven.
I know it. It's the insanity of it. Well, and equally you have to say, for all of its nonviolence, Buddhist monasteries in Tibet had standing armies and were regularly at war with one another. So exactly right.
So this is a whole nother half an hour of a conversation for sure. But it sounds like I'm getting your message is, hopefully for everybody watching, whether they have a religion that they are very committed to or are not religious, you can have a spiritual practice that can work within your religion. Or if you don't have a religion, it's not necessary to be religious to have a spiritual practice. And the simple things you talked about, loving our life, doing things from that sincere place in our heart, is and what maybe in another section we'll talk more in detail about a spiritual practice, but that's the essential.
That is the essential part of it. I mean, basically, the lighter and finer we are as a human being, the more able we will be to experience the beauty that is intrinsic to this extraordinarily chaotic field of experience that is our life. And in experiencing that beauty, we experience the interconnectedness of all things, all subjects and objects connected by cognition. We experience that connectedness. Out of the experience of that connectedness, a new ethics and a new morality arises. An ethics and a morality that doesn't just consider our religious community, but considers the human community. And more importantly, the one life that is the life of the planet. And having this new ethical experience and moral perspective, we rise up to a whole deeper understanding of why we're here, how to be here, how to be here and support the why that we're here, and how to bring ourselves to the richest possible conclusion of this experience that is available to a human being.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I hope that helped you guys a little bit out there, wherever you are in your paths, with or without a practice, with or without religion, to sort of see how we can all benefit from our practice. And in other segments, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about having a practice.